As the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself standing at the wrought iron gates of the local cemetery, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I had never ventured into a cemetery before, but something about the stillness of this place called to me. I pushed the gates open, the creaking sound echoing through the evening air, and stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt an unusual serenity wash over me, as if the weight of the world was momentarily lifted from my shoulders. The rows of tombstones stretched out before me, each one telling a story of a life once lived. I wandered deeper into the cemetery, my sneakers crunching on the gravel path. The air was cool, and the faint scent of damp earth lingered, mingling with the faint perfume of wilting flowers left by grieving visitors. I paused to read the inscriptions on some of the headstones, my fingers lightly tracing the letters carved into the stone. "Here lies Sarah Thompson, beloved daughter and sister," I read aloud, feeling a pang of sadness for the life that had ended too soon. "And here, John Smith, a friend to many." It was surreal to think that these names represented real people, with hopes and dreams, just like mine. I continued my exploration, drawn to a particular section of the cemetery where the stones seemed older, their surfaces weathered and worn by time. As I made my way through the aisles, a chill ran down my spine, and I glanced around, my instincts telling me I wasn't alone. Then I spotted it, a gravestone that caught my attention. It was much more worn than the others, almost as if it had been forgotten by time itself. The name engraved on it read Emily Parker, and the dates etched into the stone sent a shiver through me. 1995, 2013. My eyes widened as I realized that the year of her death was just a few years before I was born. What had happened to her? "Who were you, Emily?" I whispered, squatting down to examine the grave more closely. The stone was covered in moss, and I could barely make out the faded inscription. "Beloved daughter, taken too soon." I felt an inexplicable connection to this girl I had never met. It was as if her spirit lingered, waiting for someone to remember her. As dusk settled, the atmosphere grew heavier, and I could have sworn I heard soft whispers drifting through the air. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out, half expecting to see someone else wandering through the cemetery. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. After a moment, I shook my head, dismissing the feeling of unease that crept over me. "It's just the wind," I muttered, trying to convince myself. But deep down, I felt something more, an urgency, a pull towards Emily's story. "I need to know what happened to you," I said softly, glancing back at her grave. The whispers seemed to grow louder, almost beckoning me to uncover the truth hidden beneath the layers of time and sorrow. I took a deep breath and stepped back, my resolve hardening. I would return to this place to unravel the mystery of Emily Parker and the love that had been lost. As I turned to leave, the last rays of sunlight disappeared completely, and the cemetery was cloaked in shadows. I felt a strange sense of longing as I walked away, like I was leaving a part of myself behind. "I'll be back," I promised, glancing over my shoulder one last time at Emily's grave, already feeling an inexplicable bond forming between us, one that would lead me down an unexpected path. The rain was relentless, tapping against my window like an urgent whisper. I wrapped my fingers around the well-worn spine of the old diary I had found in the local library, its pages yellowed and fragile. The ink, though faded, was still legible, and I felt a strange thrill as I prepared to dive into the world of Emily and Jake. I had to know what had happened to them, and maybe, just maybe, it would help me understand my own pain. As I settled into my worn-out armchair, I opened the diary to the first entry, August 14th, 1999. The neat handwriting immediately drew me in. Emily's voice flooded my mind, and I could almost hear her laughter as I read about her summer love with Jake. Each page painted a vivid picture of their happiness, their stolen moments beneath the stars, and the dreams they shared. But as I turned the pages, the tone began to shift. "Jake is everything to me," one entry read. "But there's something lurking in the shadows. Tom has been acting strange lately. I can feel his eyes on me, and I hate that it makes me feel guilty." I frowned, the name Tom sending a chill down my spine. I had heard whispers about him, how he had been obsessed with Emily, how his jealousy had turned him into a bitter soul. I flipped ahead, desperate to find out more. In the next entry, Emily wrote about a fight that had erupted between Jake and Tom. Tom confronted Jake today. "It was bad," she wrote, the words trembling on the page. "He accused Jake of taking me away from him, of ruining everything. I never meant for this to happen, and now I'm terrified. What if it comes between us? I don't want to lose Jake." I felt my heart racing. It became clearer that Tom's obsession with Emily had created a rift. I could almost hear the tension in the air, the way emotions could twist and turn into something dark. My mind raced with images of that night, the accident, the chaos, the sorrow. I found myself shivering, the weight of their unresolved story pressing down on me. That night, as I lay in bed, the words from the diary kept swirling in my mind, mixing with the sounds of the storm outside. I closed my eyes, but sleep evaded me. Instead, shadows danced behind my eyelids, and I was thrust into a dream that felt all too real. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself standing at the wrought iron gates of the local cemetery, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I had never ventured into a cemetery before, but something about the stillness of this place called to me. I pushed the gates open, the creaking sound echoing through the evening air, and stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt an unusual serenity wash over me, as if the weight of the world was momentarily lifted from my shoulders. The rows of tombstones stretched out before me, each one telling a story of a life once lived. I wandered deeper into the cemetery, my sneakers crunching on the gravel path. The air was cool, and the faint scent of damp earth lingered, mingling with the faint perfume of wilting flowers left by grieving visitors. I paused to read the inscriptions on some of the headstones, my fingers lightly tracing the letters carved into the stone. "Here lies Sarah Thompson, beloved daughter and sister," I read aloud, feeling a pang of sadness for the life that had ended too soon. "And here, John Smith, a friend to many." It was surreal to think that these names represented real people, with hopes and dreams, just like mine. I continued my exploration, drawn to a particular section of the cemetery where the stones seemed older, their surfaces weathered and worn by time. As I made my way through the aisles, a chill ran down my spine, and I glanced around, my instincts telling me I wasn't alone. Then I spotted it, a gravestone that caught my attention. It was much more worn than the others, almost as if it had been forgotten by time itself. The name engraved on it read Emily Parker, and the dates etched into the stone sent a shiver through me. 1995, 2013. My eyes widened as I realized that the year of her death was just a few years before I was born. What had happened to her? "Who were you, Emily?" I whispered, squatting down to examine the grave more closely. The stone was covered in moss, and I could barely make out the faded inscription. "Beloved daughter, taken too soon." I felt an inexplicable connection to this girl I had never met. It was as if her spirit lingered, waiting for someone to remember her. As dusk settled, the atmosphere grew heavier, and I could have sworn I heard soft whispers drifting through the air. I stood up abruptly, my heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out, half expecting to see someone else wandering through the cemetery. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. After a moment, I shook my head, dismissing the feeling of unease that crept over me. "It's just the wind," I muttered, trying to convince myself. But deep down, I felt something more, an urgency, a pull towards Emily's story. "I need to know what happened to you," I said softly, glancing back at her grave. His face was etched with lines of sorrow and wisdom, as if he carried the burdens of countless stories within him. "You're looking for answers, aren't you?" he asked, his voice gravely yet gentle. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I need to know what happened to Emily and Jake. I can feel their pain." The man's eyes softened. "Ah, the tragic tale of Emily and Jake. It's a story that still lingers in this town, like a ghost that won't rest. They were in love, you know? But love can be a double-edged sword." I leaned closer, eager to hear more. "What happened?" He sighed, memories flooding back to him. "It was a stormy night, much like tonight. They were supposed to meet at the old bridge, but Jake never made it. Emily was waiting, heart full of hope. But there was Tom. Tom was a friend of Jake's, and he had his own feelings for Emily. That night, he let jealousy drive him to intervene." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Did he do something to Jake? The old man shook his head. It's not that simple, young man. Tom thought he was protecting his friend, trying to prevent a confrontation that would ruin everything. But in trying to do the right thing, he inadvertently caused the worst. My mind raced with the implications. So, Tom's jealousy led to the accident? Yes, he replied, his gaze distant. Tom couldn't bear to see Jake and Emily together. He believed that if he could just keep them apart for a little while longer, things would settle down. But fate had other plans. The storm made the roads treacherous, and in the chaos, tragedy struck. Do you think Tom blames himself? I asked, feeling the weight of the story settle in my chest. The man nodded solemnly. He never got over it. Some say he's cursed, living with the ghosts of his past. The guilt consumes him day after day. I took a deep breath, the pieces of the puzzle starting to align. Where is Tom now? Lives in the old house on Maple Street, he replied, pointing in the direction. You might find him there, but be warned, he's not the same man he once was. The pain has twisted him. I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. I had to know more. Thank you, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I think I need to talk to him. As I walked away, the weight of the man's words echoed in my mind. Emily and Jake's love, intertwined with Tom's jealousy, had created a cycle of anguish that seemed unbreakable. I could almost feel the air thickening with the unresolved emotions of the past, and I knew I had to confront Tom. Back at the cemetery, I stood before Emily's gravestone once more, my heart racing. I'll find the truth, I promised, determination surging within me. I won't let your story end in pain. As I turned to leave, a sudden breeze swept through the cemetery, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down my spine. I saw flashes of Emily and Jake, their smiles radiant, but then darkness loomed, and I felt the weight of despair. Why? I whispered into the silence of my room. What happened? The days that followed were restless. I spent hours in the cemetery, staring at Emily's weathered gravestone, hoping for answers. The whispers I had heard before now felt like a call, an invitation to dig deeper. I knew I couldn't just leave it alone. I had to uncover the truth. One evening, overwhelmed by the need for answers, I returned to the library. A warm light flickered in the corner, and the librarian glanced up from her desk. Back again? She asked, a knowing smile on her face. Yeah, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm looking for anything about Emily and Jake, or Tom. Her expression shifted slightly, a hint of concern flickering in her eyes. That story, it's a tragic one. They were all so young. Just be careful, okay? Some stories have a way of haunting those who uncover them. I nodded, though her warning only fueled my curiosity. I spent the next few hours combing through local newspapers, searching for clippings that might shed light on the fateful night. Then, amidst the yellowed pages, I found it. An article titled "Tragic Accident Claims 2 Young Lives." My heart raced as I read. Emily Carter, 17, and Jake Thompson, 18, died in a car crash last night. Witnesses reported seeing a confrontation shortly before the accident involving a third individual, Tom Richards, who was seen at the scene. The words blurred as I processed the implications. Tom had been there. He was part of this tragedy, his jealousy somehow entwined with their fate. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, a mix of anger and sadness. I had to confront this. I needed to understand how their lives had intersected so destructively. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, the images of the diary and the articles swirling in my mind. The whispering winds outside felt like Emily's voice, begging for her story to be told. I had to find Tom. I had to confront him. As leaves crunched under my feet as I wandered deeper into the cemetery, the cool evening air wrapping around me like a comforting shawl. Each step felt like an invitation to uncover the secrets buried beneath the earth. I had come to this place seeking solace, but now I was driven by a curiosity that gnawed at me. The stories of the past were calling me, whispering through the stones and shadows. I approached a weathered gravestone, its inscription barely legible. It belonged to Emily, a name that had begun to haunt my thoughts. I knelt down, my fingers tracing the worn letters, feeling a connection that transcended time. "What happened to you, Emily?" I whispered into the stillness, hoping for an answer. Suddenly, the rustling of leaves caught my attention. I spun around, heart racing. An elderly man stood a few feet away, leaning on a gnarled cane. The inside of the house was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of dust and neglect. As I crossed the threshold, I felt an eerie chill envelop me, as if the very walls were steeped in memories that refused to fade. "Sit," he said gruffly, gesturing towards a worn-out chair that looked like it could collapse at any moment. I complied, my curiosity battling with an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. Tom settled into a chair across from me, his gaze drifting towards a painting on the wall. It was one of Emily, vibrant and alive, her smile frozen in time. "She was beautiful," he murmured almost to himself. "Yes," I replied softly, "and she had a love for Jake that was profound. But it all ended in tragedy. What really happened that night?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You don't understand. It wasn't just an accident. There were things, conflicts that led to it." His voice cracked, revealing the weight of his guilt. "Conflicts? What do you mean?" I pressed, leaning forward. "Was it you? Did you interfere?" Tom's eyes darkened, and for a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. But then he let out a shaky breath. "I was trying to protect her, and Jake. I thought if I could keep them apart, it would save our friendship. I didn't want to lose either of them." His voice trembled, and I could see the pain etched in his features. "Protect them from what?" I asked, my heart racing. "From each other?" "From the jealousy," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I loved her too, you know? I didn't want Jake to hurt her. I didn't want to lose her to him, so that night, when I saw them together, I tried to stop it. I thought if I could just get Jake away from her, everything would be fine." My mind raced as I absorbed his words. "You tried to keep them apart? You think that caused the accident?" "Maybe," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I was so blinded by my feelings that I didn't see the consequences. I didn't think it would lead to that. I never meant for any of this to happen." The weight of his confession hung heavy in the air, and a part of me felt sympathy for him, but another part was furious. "You don't get it, do you? Your choices had real consequences. Emily and Jake." "I know," he shouted suddenly, his eyes wide with anguish. "I know. I've lived with this every day since. I see their faces in my dreams, and I can't escape it. I am the one who destroyed everything." The pain in his voice cut through me, and I realized that beneath his anger lay a deep-seated sorrow, a man who had been haunted by his past. As I looked at him, I caught a glimpse of the boy he once was, a boy who had loved fiercely but had been consumed by his own insecurities. "Tom," I said gently, "I think you need to find a way to forgive yourself. It wasn't just you, there were so many factors at play. But holding on to this guilt won't bring them back." The inside of the house was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of dust and neglect. As I crossed the threshold, I felt an eerie chill envelop me, as if the very walls were steeped in memories that refused to fade. "Sit," he said gruffly, gesturing towards a worn-out chair that looked like it could collapse at any moment. I complied, my curiosity battling with an unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. Tom settled into a chair across from me, his gaze drifting towards a painting on the wall. It was one of Emily, vibrant and alive, her smile frozen in time. "She was beautiful," he murmured almost to himself. "Yes," I replied softly, "and she had a love for Jake that was profound. But it all ended in tragedy. What really happened that night?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You don't understand. It wasn't just an accident. There were things, conflicts that led to it." His voice cracked, revealing the weight of his guilt. "Conflicts? What do you mean?" I pressed, leaning forward. "Was it you? Did you interfere?" Tom's eyes darkened, and for a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. But then he let out a shaky breath. "I was trying to protect her, and Jake. I thought if I could keep them apart, it would save our friendship. I didn't want to lose either of them." His voice trembled, and I could see the pain etched in his features. "Protect them from what?" I asked, my heart racing. "From each other?" "From the jealousy," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I loved her too, you know? I didn't want Jake to hurt her. I didn't want to lose her to him, so that night, when I saw them together, I tried to stop it. I thought if I could just get Jake away from her, everything would be fine." My mind raced as I absorbed his words. "You tried to keep them apart? You think that caused the accident?" "Maybe," he said, his voice thick with regret. I was so blinded by my feelings that I didn't see the consequences. I didn't think it would lead to that. I never meant for any of this to happen. The weight of his confession hung heavy in the air, and a part of me felt sympathy for him, but another part was furious. You don't get it, do you? Your choices had real consequences. Emily and Jake. I know, he shouted suddenly, his eyes wide with anguish. I know. I've lived with this every day since. I see their faces in my dreams, and I can't escape it. I am the one who destroyed everything. The pain in his voice cut through me, and I realized that beneath his anger lay a deep-seated sorrow, a man who had been haunted by his past. As I looked at him, I caught a glimpse of the boy he once was, a boy who had loved fiercely but had been consumed by his own insecurities. Tom, I said gently, I think you need to find a way to forgive yourself. It wasn't just you, there were so many factors at play, but holding on to this guilt won't bring them back. He met my gaze, and for a moment the walls he had built around himself seemed to crack. I don't know if I can forgive myself, he admitted, his voice trembling. Maybe you don't have to do it alone, I suggested, my heart racing as I realized the possibility of healing that lay ahead. Maybe together we can find a way to honor their memory, find peace for all of us. As I stepped into Tom's dilapidated house, a chill ran down my spine. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were soaked in sorrow. The faint scent of mildew hung around, mixing with the musty smell of old wood and neglect. I hesitated at the entrance, the creaking floorboards echoing my uncertainty. Just beyond the threshold, I could sense the weight of the past pressing down on me, urging me to uncover the truth hidden within these crumbling walls. Who's there? A raspy voice called from the shadows, pulling me from my thoughts. Tom emerged slowly, his figure illuminated by a sliver of light that broke through a grimy window. He looked older than I had imagined, with deep lines etched into his face and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of regret. It's Ryan, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I came to talk about Emily and Jake. Tom's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition mixed with pain. You're the boy who's been visiting the cemetery. He took a cautious step forward, his hands trembling slightly. What do you want to know? I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. I want to understand what happened that night. The accident. You knew them. You were there. Tom sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping, as if the very air was too heavy for him to bear. You think you know the story, but it's more complicated than you can imagine. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, on a rickety chair that creaked under my weight. Please, Tom. I need to hear it from you, I urged, leaning forward. I've seen glimpses, but I don't know the truth. He hesitated, his gaze drifting to a faded painting on the wall, a portrait of Emily that seemed to capture her essence, her spirit forever alive in the brushstrokes. She was everything to me, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I was never what she wanted. Why did you intervene? I asked, my curiosity piqued. When Jake was supposed to meet her? Tom's eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind them. I thought I was protecting her. I thought if I could keep Jake away, I could save our friendship. I didn't want him to hurt her, or me. His voice cracked as he spoke, the weight of his confession hanging heavily in the air. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. But you didn't save anyone, did you? You just made things worse. Tom looked away, embarrassment flooding his features. I know that now. I was consumed by jealousy, by my own insecurities. I never meant for any of it to happen. He paused, staring at the floor as if it might provide some solace. When the accident occurred, I was supposed to be there to stop them. Instead, I let my emotions take control. A silence fell between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the regret etched on his face, a mirror to the pain I felt in my own heart. What happened that night? I asked softly, trying to coax the truth from him. Tom took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists. I was hiding nearby, watching as Jake arrived. I was about to step in when I saw Emily running toward him. They were so happy, laughing, and then it all went wrong. I shouted for Jake, but it was too late. His voice trembled, tears glistening in his eyes. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I ended up causing their pain. I can't escape it. Tom, you have to stop blaming yourself, I said, feeling the urge to comfort him despite the rage I felt bubbling within. You didn't cause the accident. You were trying to protect her." He shook his head vehemently, his expression desperate. "No, Ryan, I did cause it. My actions set everything in motion. If I hadn't intervened, they would have been together. They might have been safe. I can't live with that." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "You're not alone in this, Tom. You have to understand that there's a way to move forward, to find peace." Tom looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Do you really think that's possible?" "I do," I replied firmly, sensing the connection between us deepening. "We just have to confront the past and let go of the pain, together." As he met my gaze, I could see the struggle within him. There was a part of him that wanted to believe, to find redemption. But there was also a darkness that clung to him like a shadow, a reminder of the choices he had made. Maybe you're right," he murmured, his voice cracking. "But how?" As nights wore on, the boundary between my world and that of Emily and Jake began to blur. I found myself trapped in a cycle of dreams that felt increasingly real. One particular night, the darkness enveloped me, and I felt a pull, as if I was being drawn into the past. I was standing in the middle of a familiar street, the air thick with anticipation, the kind that usually precedes a storm. The streetlights cast a dim glow, illuminating the scene before me. I watched as two figures emerged in the distance. It was Jake and Emily, their youth and vitality radiating like a beacon. They were laughing, their voices ringing like chimes in the breeze. I could almost taste the joy they shared, a stark contrast to the heaviness that hung over me. I could see the love in their eyes as they drew closer, but then I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a tension that pulled at my gut. Suddenly, a shadow lurked behind them, and my heart raced. It was Tom, his face twisted with a mix of desperation and jealousy. I could feel his emotions, a palpable force that crackled in the air. He stepped forward, blocking Jake's path. "You can't see her, Jake. You don't understand what you're doing," he shouted, his voice laced with a wild urgency that sent chills down my spine. I wanted to shout, to warn Jake, to tell him to turn back, but I was frozen, a mere spectator in this tragic play. I watched helplessly as Jake's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "What are you talking about, Tom? Emily is my girlfriend. I love her." Jake's voice thundered, echoing in the stillness of the night. My breath quickened as I realized the confrontation was escalating. Emily stood between them, her eyes wide, glistening with fear and confusion. "Please, both of you, just stop," she pleaded, but her words fell on deaf ears. The air crackled with tension, and I could feel the impending doom that hung over them like a storm cloud. Then, in a moment that felt like a cruel twist of fate, Tom lunged forward. "I'm trying to protect you, Emily. You don't see what he's capable of," he shouted desperately, his hands gripping her shoulders as if he could shield her from the world. In that instant, I could see the truth unraveling before me. Tom's misguided intentions were blinding him to the love that existed between Jake and Emily. I had thought of Tom as a victim of his obsession, but now I saw the darkness that had consumed him, the misguided sense of possession he felt over Emily. As the confrontation spiraled out of control, I felt myself being pulled deeper into the scene. I was no longer just a bystander, I was a part of their story. The night transformed, and I found myself standing beside Emily, feeling her fear and confusion. "Ryan?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if she sensed my presence, even in this dreamlike state. "Emily, I'm here," I exclaimed, desperate to reach her. "You have to listen. This isn't how it's supposed to end." But my voice was lost in the chaos. The confrontation escalated. Jake pushed Tom away, and in the heat of the moment I saw the flicker of rage in Tom's eyes. Time slowed, and I could see the moment before the accident unfold like a tragic film. Emily turned to Jake, her voice trembling. "You have to go. Please, just go." "Emily, I won't leave you," Jake shouted, but it was too late. The deafening roar of a car engine cut through the air, a harbinger of doom. My heart sank as I realized the inevitable. The crash was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. As the world around me shattered into darkness, I awoke with a start, gasping for breath. The weight of what I had witnessed pressed down on me, and I could feel the tears streaming down my cheeks. I understood now, with brutal clarity, that Emily had been on the verge of choosing love, but the chaos of Tom's jealousy had twisted fate into something tragic. The cycle of pain had to end, Not just for them, but for me too. I needed to find a way to bring closure to their story. The weight of their unresolved love and sorrow hung heavily on my heart, urging me to act. I couldn't let their pain linger any longer. I stood at the edge of the cemetery, the air thick with anticipation and a sense of purpose that coursed through my veins. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows over the ancient headstones that surrounded me. I had decided that today would be the day I would finally bring some peace to the tormented souls of Emily and Jake. With Tom beside me, I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filling my lungs. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Tom, who looked more fragile than I had ever seen him. His face was etched with lines of regret, and for a moment I felt a twinge of sympathy. He nodded slowly, his eyes downcast, unable to meet mine. "I've never been more ready," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared, Ryan. What if they don't forgive me?" I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of his sorrow. "That's why we're here. They need to hear you say it. They need to know you're truly sorry." We walked towards the small clearing where I had set up the makeshift altar. It was nothing extravagant, just a few flowers I had picked from my mother's garden, a candle, and a small framed photo of Emily and Jake I had found in the diary. As I arranged the items, I could feel the chill of the evening settling in, the shadows growing longer and more menacing. "Let's start," I said, my voice firm. I gestured for Tom to stand beside me. "This is for Emily and Jake, for both of them." We held hands, and I closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of courage I had. "Emily, Jake, we're here today to honor your memories, to acknowledge the love you shared and the pain that followed. We want to set you free." I opened my eyes, glancing at Tom, who was visibly trembling. "Go on, Tom. You need to say it." He took a deep breath, his face a mask of anguish. "Emily," he began, his voice cracking, "I am so sorry for everything. I was selfish and foolish. I let my jealousy cloud my judgment, and I never meant for anything bad to happen to you or Jake. I was wrong to think I could protect you by keeping you apart." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above us as if encouraging him to continue. "Please forgive me," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "I've carried this guilt for so long, and I can't bear it any longer." I squeezed his hand, feeling the tremors of his emotions. "Keep going. They're listening." Tom's eyes were closed now, his forehead creased in concentration. "Jake, I know we were friends, but I let my feelings for Emily get in the way. I was blinded by my obsession, and I realize now that I didn't just hurt you, I hurt her too. I'm so sorry." I glanced around, half expecting to see the spirits of Emily and Jake materializing before us, but the cemetery remained still and quiet. Still, I felt an energy building, a sense of release, like a storm cloud on the verge of bursting. "Now, I want to speak," I said, my heart racing. "Emily, Jake, I've been drawn to your story. I felt your pain. I understand what it's like to lose someone you love. I lost my dad recently, and it's been the hardest thing I've ever faced. But I believe that love transcends even death. We need to let go of this pain, for ourselves and for you." The candle flickered violently, and I could almost hear the whispers of the past swirling around us. "It's time to heal," I said, my voice stronger now. "You deserve peace. We all do." As I looked into Tom's eyes, I saw a glimmer of hope, a flicker of the man he could be if he allowed himself to let go of the past. "Let's end this cycle of pain together," I urged him, my determination unwavering. "We owe it to them and to ourselves." Tom nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "I'm ready, Ryan. I just want to make things right." I felt the air shift around us, a subtle warmth wrapping itself around our bodies, and for a fleeting moment, I believed that Emily and Jake were listening, that they were finally ready to let go. I took a step back, glancing at the altar one last time before turning to Tom. "Let's continue. They're here with us." In that moment, I knew we were on the brink of something transformative. We stood together in the gathering dusk, united in our grief and our desire for redemption. As I stood in the dim light of the cemetery, the air felt charged with an energy I couldn't quite explain. I glanced around at the gathered headstones, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. My heart raced. I was about to confront something bigger than myself. Something that had been haunting this place long before I arrived. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A gust of wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down my spine. It was as if the cemetery itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. I felt a pull, an undeniable urge to stand my ground, to witness whatever was about to unfold. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the lights flickering, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the darkness. "Is this really happening?" I whispered to myself, trying to calm the storm of emotions within me. Just then, I saw them. Figures began to emerge from the swirling mist, a soft glow illuminating their forms. Emily and Jake stood before me, their expressions serene, yet laden with an indescribable sadness. "Ryan." Emily's voice was like a melody, soft and soothing, yet filled with a depth of sorrow. "You've done so much for us." I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "I just wanted to help. I thought maybe I could bring you peace." I struggled to find the right words, feeling the weight of their story pressing down on me. Jake nodded, a faint smile breaking through his otherwise somber demeanor. "You've given us a chance we thought we'd never have. It's been so long since we felt free." "But it's not just about you two," I stammered, the gravity of the moment sinking in. "I need to understand. Why did this happen? Why did it have to end like this?" The question hung in the air, thick with unresolved pain. Emily stepped forward, her spirit shimmering like a candle in the dark. "It wasn't just the accident that bound us, Ryan. It was the choices we made, the jealousy, the misunderstandings. Tom didn't realize how deeply his actions would affect us. We were all caught in a web we couldn't escape." I swallowed hard, the realization hitting me like a wave. "Tom? He just wanted to protect you, but it all went so wrong." "Yes," Jake said, his voice steady but tinged with regret. "And in his desire to protect, he lost sight of what truly mattered. Our love was real, but it became a battleground of hurt and resentment. We never wanted this to happen." Emily looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Ryan. You've shown us that it's possible to forgive, to let go of the pain that has tethered us here for so long." "But how do I let go?" I asked, feeling the weight of my own grief pressing down on me. I lost my dad, and it feels like a part of me is still trapped in that moment. Jake stepped closer, his presence comforting. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting the pain, acknowledging it, and then choosing to live despite it. You have the power to break free from your own cycle of grief, just as we do." As I looked into their eyes, a sense of calm washed over me. I could feel the connection we shared, the understanding that transcended time and space. "I want to help you find peace," I said, my voice stronger now. "I want to see you both free." Emily smiled softly, a light radiating from her spirit. "You're already doing it, Ryan. By confronting the truth and embracing your own pain, you're setting us free. Thank you for being our voice, for bringing us back together, even if just for this moment." In that instant, I felt a shift within myself. The burdens I had carried began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. I realized that this was more than just a story of love and loss. It was a journey toward healing for all of us. "Goodbye, Ryan," Emily whispered, her form beginning to dissolve into the gentle night. "Remember us, but don't let the past define you." "Goodbye," I called out, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for showing me the way." As their figures faded into the ethereal glow, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The air around me felt lighter, the weight of sorrow lifting. I had not only helped them find peace, but I had also discovered a new path for myself. As I walked away from the cemetery, the weight of the ceremony still lingered in the air, a bittersweet taste of closure intertwined with the fresh breeze that danced around me. I turned to Tom, who was beside me, his face a mix of relief and sorrow. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a shadow moving against the backdrop of the gravestones. It was a figure, shrouded in darkness, almost as if it were a part of the very shadows that clung to the night. "Tom, do you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He squinted into the gloom, confusion etched on his features. "What are you talking about, Ryan?" Before I could respond, the figure stepped forward, revealing itself to be a younger version of Tom. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar features, the same eyes that had once glimmered with obsession and regret, but now they were filled with a haunting emptiness. "Who are you?" I demanded, instinctively stepping back. The air felt charged with tension, and I could sense something deeply unsettling about this encounter. The younger Tom looked at me with a mix of anger and despair. "I'm the Tom you don't know, the one who couldn't let go." "Let go of what?" I challenged, my pulse quickening. "Is it the pain you caused? The lives you ruined?" He laughed bitterly, the sound echoing eerily in the stillness of the night. "You think you understand? You think you freed Emily and Jake? You don't know the half of it." "What do you mean?" I shot back, frustration boiling within me. "I was there. I saw everything. Emily and Jake are free now." "Free?" His voice rose, laced with a manic edge. "They're trapped. Just like me. Just like you." He pointed a finger at me, eyes wild with a feverish intensity. "You think you can just walk away from this? You think you can absolve yourself of the pain and suffering? You're just as guilty as I am." I felt a wave of anger wash over me. Guilty? I didn't cause that accident. I'm trying to help them. "Help," he scoffed. "You're just a kid playing with ghosts. I was the one who drove them apart. I was the one who couldn't let Emily go, and in trying to hold on to her, I lost everything. I am the reason they're stuck in that cycle of pain." "Stop," I shouted, my voice cracking. "You don't get to blame me for your mistakes. I'm not here to carry your guilt." But as I stood there, facing this younger version of Tom, I realized that he was just a reflection of the pain and regret that had plagued the older Tom all these years. There was a cycle here, a twisted loop of grief that needed to be broken. "Why do you hate yourself so much?" I asked, my voice softer now, tinged with empathy. "What happened that night?" "I was jealous," he confessed, his voice trembling. "Jake was everything I wanted to be. He had her. He had it all. I thought if I could just keep them apart, maybe I could be the one. But I didn't realize that my actions would lead to disaster." I stepped closer, the anger within me shifting to understanding. "You didn't mean for it to happen, did you?" "The accident, it was an accident. But I made it happen," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I manipulated events, and in my desperation, I turned love into hatred. I caused it all." "Then let go," I urged him. "You don't have to be trapped in this cycle of your own making. You can choose to break free, just like Emily and Jake did." He shook his head, the younger Tom's anguish palpable. "But how? I'm stuck in this past, haunted by my choices." "By facing them," I replied firmly. "By accepting what you did and allowing it to be part of your story, not the whole of it. You have to forgive yourself, Tom. They would want you to." He stared at me, the war in his eyes raging, and for a moment I thought I saw the flicker of hope. "Do you really think I can?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "You have to believe it. For yourself and for Emily and Jake, you need to choose to let go." The younger Tom drew in a breath, his face softening as he considered my words. Maybe I can try." "Then do it," I encouraged, feeling a surge of determination. "You don't have to carry this burden anymore." As I spoke, the shadows around us began to shift, the air lightening as if the weight of the past was lifting. The younger Tom looked at me, a glimmer of something like peace dawning in his expression, and I knew we were on the brink of breaking the cycle that had held us all captive for far too long.